woke up this morning and he had this horrible feeling that no one would show up. How could we possibly ever say that? The fact is, if we had even more publicity, we would have had people standing out on the street right out to 501. There's no doubt about it. But this is a great crowd, and we're so thrilled that you're here. Now, during the series that we'll be doing, I'll be interviewing many of the folks because some of them are not like Jack. Jack could stand up here and talk for 7 days straight and never breathe, and I would never have to ask a question, or you wouldn't have to ask, you wouldn't even have time to ask questions because Jack can handle it. But the fact is, today we're going to try to keep Jack to the hour, and then we will let you ask questions. So don't, yes. And Jack told me that we'll let you ask the question, I'll repeat it, it'll give him time to think like they do in the Miss America pageant, you understand, and then he'll have an answer for you. But as you know, Jack is truly a legend. That word is used a lot. He is the most influential historian we have in the area. And as you know, it's all because of his outstanding photography. Now, the one thing he's going to tell you today that is not true is the fact that he came here with his brother and a friend to get a job and to move from the upstate here. I happen to know it was to pick up chicks. Many of you are here today that he picked up over the years. So that's why I told you there'd be a lot more women here than men. I told you that. But anyway, as you know, he's not just a legend, he's someone we love and treasure. This is Jack Thompson.
Thank you for coming to see this picture show. And of course, the pictures are not new. Neither am I. But the pictures, if you have not seen them, they are new to you. And Diane, with all of that about Jack Thompson, I've got a story to tell, and Chuck, close your ears. You know, back in the early 60s, I think, there was a young gal in Florence who was promoting a furniture store. And I kind of got a crush on that girl. And I thought, that's the cutest little gal I've ever seen. Lo and behold, she wound up in Myrtle Beach and wound up as the MC of the Sun Fund Festival. And I had the opportunity to get to know Diane. And on one occasion, close your ears, Chuck. On one occasion, she said, Jack, are you walking back to your studio? And I said, well, yes, I am. She said, well, in this crowd, can I walk back with you? And I said, well, sure, I'd be impressed to have you walk with me. So walking up the sidewalk past Sloppy Joe's, Diane said, Jack, I'll bet you've romanced most of the women in Myrtle Beach. I said, yes, Diane, but you're the one that got away.
Thank you, Jack.
Okay, we'll move on with the picture show, and we need to get this set up so that it will. I thank you all for coming today. We do have a wonderful show, and all the photographs deserve 1,000 words. So I know you need to look at your watch to see how long that's going to take. I should have brought the popcorn concession. Okay, starting in the early days, those could have been my footprints. When I hitchhiked down here when I was 13, found a job right away in the pavilion at the photo booth, photographing pretty girls. couple of days later, my older brother came to take me home. And he said, but I'm going on the beach today and get a suntan. But we're going home tomorrow. You did a bad thing hitchhiking down here. That evening, he came off the beach with his arm around a pretty girl. He said, I ain't going home. So he said, anyway, I better tell you a little bit of that. He said, can you get me a job here at the photo stand? And I said, well, Daryl's going home tomorrow. Maybe I can get you his job. Worst mistake I made. That whole summer, I worked my shift and Joe's shift while he was on the beach with Doris. But he later married Doris, and they have 2 wonderful children. And I might mention that Joe Jr. is the guy in the sky with the big camera. He's operating the eye in the sky. I said, Joe, can you get me some pictures of New York, Chicago, Los Angeles? He said, Jack, all of our attention is in Afghanistan and the Middle East. And I said, well, okay, I see a lot of that on television. But anyway, thank you for listening to that story. I'll be happy to show you some of these photographs. And that, of course, is the waterway, but I call it Horry County, and a river runs through it. In my early days starting out, yes, I did eventually go uptown and work at Skip's studio for Mr. Dwight Lamb, who became my mentor. And Dwight taught me how to use the big camera, and he got into politics and became the city judge. He became the president of just about every civic club in town and was instrumental in the beginning of the Chamber of Commerce. And yes, I just wanted to show that is the moon where I photographed pretty girls. But actually, I just wanted to show you that I did have hair when I started out. Jack Thompson surrounded by his photographs. The bridge over into Conway, over the Waccamaw River. This is a picture that shows the highway into Conway with no trees. So in recent years, people didn't realize that there were lakes and moats on each side of the highway because the trees eventually grew up and you couldn't tell there were water over there. And yes, Jerry Cox Company, a sister to Chapin Company in Conway. Myrtle Beach. As you can see, you know, I'm apologizing because I did bring my point and laser, but it doesn't work on this screen here. So I can't point out, but you can see the Myrtle Beach High School, Presbyterian Church, the Ocean Plaza Hotel, and the Ocean Plaza Pier. Myrtle Beach in 1954. And the Chapin Shell Station on the corner of 9th Avenue, and this is important because being sponsored by the city, I have to point out City Hall. So we all have had meager beginnings. And yes, there was a time in 1954 when Sports Illustrated came to Myrtle Beach, and the chamber, with my mentor Dwight Lamb, organized a lot of these local beauties to greet the train. In 1954, and their meetings Their meeting was held in Pine Lakes Country Club, whereupon they decided to originate Sports Illustrated magazine. And I could name every one of those girls, but they wouldn't want to hear it. In 1957, the Myrtle Beach Pavilion. With my laser, I could point out a lot of things, but City Hall, Skip Studio, and of course the Methodist Church. It's just a nice picture to gaze upon, so I'm allowing you to gaze upon that picture. And the Lafayette Manor here, the Woodside brothers built the Lafayette Manor during the time that they also built the Ocean Forest Hotel. Another view of the pavilion area. And I would say it was the 4th of July, considering the parking lot is relatively full. Here is the Chesterfield Inn that we lost recently. On the 4th of July, Mr. Earl Husted, who was the manager of the pavilion, would always have a free act down in front of the pavilion on the beach area. And this couple here is the Flying Wolindas. Many of you may remember the Flying Wolindas. And their son is sitting back on the sand with a sand bucket. But a few years ago, he, the son, walked across the Grand Canyon on a tight wire. He also walked across skyscrapers in Chicago and also in Manhattan, Chicago, and New York. Flying Wolindas. Sun Fun Days. I don't know if Buzz Plotter's here today, but that's Buzz Plotter, who has the Gate-Dolphin gift code. And that's little Denise Parks. Bill Rogers. Having a great time at Sun Fun. In the early days of the pavilion, actually when the pavilion was first built, it was built for the entertainment of Conway aristocrats, Conway farmers, so they could come over on the weekends, especially on Sunday, and enjoy the pavilion and the beach and the amusement rides.
Look where we could park.
And yes, it was always a good time down on the beach. And this is a time when the Myrtle Beach Air Force Base was activated. And you can see that it was probably a time where the guys were trying to make out. I might say this young lady here told me one day her picture wound up on the cover of one of the books. She said, I didn't have a bathing suit and my mother made me a bathing suit out of one of the drapes in the house. She said, I was so ashamed of that bathing suit. And then I wound up on the cover of a magazine. Ocean Boulevard, driving the barge is what it was called. Back in the day, and the cars would just go round and around, waiting for that right pickup to jump on the car. But these were the days, that was in July the 4th of 1950. Mr. Earl Houston on the 4th of July every year would go down on the waterfront and set off fireworks to entertain the thousands of tourists. What a great time this was, and I guess since we're all adults in here, I might tell the story. These cars all lined up here. A few years ago, the Myrtle Beach Airport became the international airport. And the governor, Carol Campbell, did a press conference at the jetport. And he was with me the time that I made that picture, of course. I failed to mention that Carol Campbell hitchhiked with me down here in 1951. But his dad came and jerked him up and made a governor out of it. So I blew that picture up about that size and I took it out to the jetport. And when I thought the press conference was over, I walked out of the crowd and I said, "Oh, Governor, I got a souvenir for you." And he stopped everything and he said, "Jack, you couldn't give me anything I'll treasure any more than that." He said, "Don't you remember I was in the back seat of that Buick?" I said, "Governor, I think we're still on camera." Okay, I think our little
Stuck. Oh, there we go.
And yes, in the Myrtle Beach Pavilion, right, Rich? It had the wonderful organ from the 1887 World's Fair in Belgium. This organ was on display, and Mr. Edward Burris, along with Mr. James Bryan, arranged to buy that organ and brought it over and placed it in the Myrtle Beach Amusement Park. And what a grand thing that was, because you could hear that music and that band playing all over the neighborhood. And crowds would gather and sit in front of that organ for a long time, just to enjoy that music. Picture made about the last night that the pavilion lights were on. Shortly after the lights went out and the pavilion came down. Broke the hearts of all of us. Two little guys wanting to know what it takes to be a lifeguard. I might mention that this guy here went on to become Lifeguard of the Year. And Buddy Rogers became our high school coach, a beloved high school coach. And Buddy died at an early age in the 50s with a heart attack. Oh, what a story this is. These were contestants for the South Carolina Miss Universe. And I was down on the beach with Miriam Stevenson in front there. Went on to win the Miss South Carolina Universe. But while I've got the camera on a tripod and a black cloth over my head with a big 4x5 camera, the girls started screaming. And I thought, oh, what have I done? And they're looking down the beach, and here comes Mickey Spillane, the mystery writer, running down the beach in a Speedo. And he runs up and plops down right beside Miriam Stevenson. Thank you, Mickey. That made a great picture. Miss South Carolina, Miss Maid of Cotton, Miss Ambets, Miss Everything, Martha Dean Chestnut of Conway. Absolutely beautiful gal.
Yeah.
And yes, we have hurricanes actually come and visit Myrtle Beach. Hurricane Hazel, October 14, 15, 1954. And this today is the sea captain's house.
Wow.
And on down you see the Patricia Hotel. And this was the contractors talking about how they were going to be able to fix it. And that's Mr. Truman Moore, right, Clay?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Truman Moore was a major contractor in Myrtle Beach. And they actually did arrange to pick that house up and rebuild it. And many people have had lunch in this dining room right here. And I enjoyed that myself. But we really weren't ready for a hurricane back in the day because that's what we thought were hurricane walls. Little 2-foot bricks. They didn't last long. The morning after Hazel and Ocean Drive, the Ocean Drive Pavilion. I said, that looked like Humpty Dumpty. We'll never be put that back together again. Early days in Myrtle Beach, looking up the Strand to the Ocean Forest Hotel. And this is down at the Swash area where Family Kingdom is today. And the high rises, if you can notice, are the church steeple. Second Avenue Pier. Oh well, I'll go ahead and mention. This is the Gay Manor back in the day. This hotel built by Mr. Hooks. And there was a time when the only hospital we had was in Conway. And when the ladies were ready to give birth to the child, they had to rush to Conway and hope that the bridge was down. There have been many occasions when the bridge was up and babies were born on this side of the waterway. So these ladies, get this out of my way. Elizabeth Patterson, Mr. Chapin's daughter. Dr. Lynn is Julian Lynn, and Guy Cameron, the mayor's wife. They said if the city would raise $150,000 to start a hospital fund, they'd ride a fire truck through town. And they did, and I was there. And we did build a beautiful Ocean View Hospital. The Great Ocean Forest Hotel, shadowed by the Close family mansion that was donated to the city and became the Burrs and Chapin Art Museum down on the end of the boulevard. A wonderful facility, and I'm sure you all have been there many times. And the Ocean Forest. We could be here all day talking about the Ocean Forest Hotel. The Woodside brothers from Greenville, South Carolina, owned the world's largest cotton mill. And thankful to the war contracts, they had plenty of money to come to Myrtle Beach. In fact, they came on one trip by Miss General Springs of the Springs Company, invited them to Myrtle Beach, whereupon they bought Myrtle Beach on that first visit. They bought 165,000 acres and immediately hired contractors to build the Ocean Forest Hotel. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that this was the marine patio, and the hotel was exactly halfway between New York and Miami. And the big bands that traveled back and forth, they found a great place to rest over the weekend. And the manager, Milton Bachner from New York, arranged for them to play in the marine patio during their stay. And if you can imagine Myrtle Beach, we had about 600 people here. But the big bands, Tommy Dorsey, Tex Beneke, many other bands played in that during the night. And you could hear that wonderful music all over Myrtle Beach. There were big brass bands and so forth. It was a terrible time to lose that hotel. Another view. This is what we call the stables. The hotel had horses they would bring over for the guests to ride horseback up and down the beach. And yes, the hotel became in disrepair. It could not compete with all the new high-rises with the big double rooms and the double beds. The rooms in the hotel were about 8 by 10. They had a bed and a dresser, and you had to walk like this around to get into the bed or the dresser. So the rooms were not adequate. The hotel was not air conditioned. It was built on a premise that you could open the window and get all that wonderful ocean air. And the hotel actually had salt water piped into the hotel and a pool underneath the salt water. But it fell in demise. The people that owned it realized the property was more expensive than the building, so they gave the building away to Dun & Salvage in Atlanta, and they came over and took it down. And by the way, I was there. One of the main restaurants downtown in Myrtle Beach, the Cozy Corner. Tony and Angie Thompson, no relation, a Greek family. And I wish I had a magnifier, I could blow this up, but this little boy right here with an ice cream cone is Dino Thompson.
Oh my gosh.
And Angie said, "Dino, get out of here with that ice cream cone." So he had to go outside and finish his ice cream cone. Now, many of you know Dino Thompson. He has Flamingo Restaurant, the shark guy. And the Broadway restaurant, back in the day, it was a familiar restaurant for the lifeguards, the waitresses, the businessmen in town. And my original studio was right here next to the Broadway. But the popular thing about the Broadway restaurant, they had a meat, 2 vegetables, iced tea, and dessert for 85 cents.
Oh my gosh.
And they made money.
Wow.
And then Mr. Johnny Burris, who had Peach's Corner down on the boulevard, decided it was time to have a drive-in restaurant up on Highway 17. So at what is now Joe White Avenue, the corner of the Highway 17 corner, he built Mammy's Kitchen. And he called it Mammy's because Mammy worked for the Burris family. She was a beloved member of the family. They loved to call her Mammy, and that's Charles Bland. Charles went on to open a coastal taxi cab. That's Monroe Spivey, and I'm pointing this out because back in the back there, that's my dad holding my little nephew, and my mom and sister's inside there because my brother Bob was the cook. That's why every picture has a story.
That's good.
Yes, the only convenience store that you could pull up on a major highway and fill up with gas. Tom Davis Trailer Park, 9th Avenue South, and gas was 29 cents a gallon.
That's where the monkey was.
Well, I'll tell you that story. I know I'm burning up the clock, but Tom Davis was a popular spot for all the locals to go buy beer. And on Sunday, buying beer was against the law. But inside, Tom had a hammock. And on Sunday, he would lay in that hammock and had a note on his chest, and it said, "Take what you want and leave the money. Leave the money." So all the local guys would go in there and get the beer and just lay the money over there. And the police couldn't say anything to Tom because he was asleep. The Patricia Hotel. A grand hotel, and they had the European plan. They had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Downtown in Myrtle Beach, the Chapin Company. I wrote a nice blog on Facebook about Chapin Company several days ago. And I think the last I looked, it had 300 hits from people commenting about how they loved Chapin Company. And I did mention that I think Sam Walton came to Myrtle Beach back in the day and took a notebook and walked through Chapin Company and made notes about how fantastic this store was. Over 12 different departments of anything you can imagine you needed or you wanted, you found at Chapin Company. And I dare say Sam Walton went back to Florida and created Walmart, patterned after Chapin Company. And that was back when we had muscle cars. Chapin Company. That little station right here, over there, was Mr. Martin's Shell Station. And all around the station, he had wires where the little Martin birds would sit, and he would feed them several times a day. Right, Robert? Back in the day, this was another 1957 picture with the Broadway Theater, the Glamour Shop, the Cozy Corner, and Chafing Company going down. Wonderful. We had a wonderful life here. The original Myrtle Beach Airport. If you drove down Broadway and you kept on going like you were going to the airport today, when you got to the end of that street, you were at the airport. And this Mr. Fred Brinkman and his wife Roberta talking with Gloria Sapp, who won a trip to Charlotte on Piedmont Airlines. So they were there to put her on board Piedmont Airlines for
A round trip.
to Charlotte. They say we doze, but we never close. Sloppy Joe's, corner of 9th Avenue today is, what is that down there today? Somebody knows. Yes. Well, anyway, Sloppy Joe's a wonderful place. We kept a lot of lifeguards and waitresses alive with foot-long hot dogs. 25 cents for a hot dog, 25 cents for milkshake.
Wow.
So yes, a nice photograph of downtown Conway, which really hasn't changed a lot. Conway, a beautiful jewel of Owe County. I might say I made that picture because I was doing the Conway Annual in 1956 and 7. And this is the shop class. The picture went in the annual with these guys working on the car in their shop class. And I thought the most important thing about that picture was the water can. It's in somebody's museum, I'm sure. The Conway Courthouse, Conway City Hall, built by Robert Mills, who built the Washington Monument. And it still stands today, a testament to the great architectural genius of Robert Mills. Jack Thompson Studios, I gave this program to the Rotary Club a few weeks ago at the Dunes Club, and somebody said, "Jack, you must be a dinosaur." I said, "You know what, I believe you're right. Because I was here in the beginning, and so were the dinosaurs." So yes, my first studio, Judy, what was that year?
I'm not sure, but I know I've been there.
I made Judy's portrait in that studio.
Yes.
Biggest blue eyes I had ever seen. Anyway, Jack Thompson Studios, 1959.
Where was that?
Where was that located?
Sun Fun, Ramview Raceway, and Miss Ramby. I wonder if she's here today. Raise your hand. There she is. Miss Ramby Race. Diane, you're still beautiful today. And the Rivoli Theater. Thank goodness we still have the Rivoli Theater. Elvis Presley, but only in a movie. Coastal Federal Savings and Loan, thank goodness for them, because most of the houses that were built around Pine Lakes Drive and so forth were financed by Coastal Federal with HUD loans, I believe. But my studio was right there beside Coastal Federal. Unfortunately, it fell to demise in the 90s to make room for the Hurricane roller coaster. And a wonderful Flatiron building, South Carolina National Bank, wonderful offices, Ken Sanders architectural offices. Who could guess who that is?
Sharon Tate.
Sharon Tate, yes. We had a world premiere of Don't Make Waves, 1967, I believe. And Sharon Tate was here. And I kind of followed her around because I thought it was important. She was a movie star. I have a lot of wonderful pictures of her. Too many to bother you about today. 1967, we built the convention center and had that Greek Roman architecture. A beautiful building, and yes, it demanded to be expanded, and it has. Now we have that beautiful convention center today, adjacent to the Sheraton Hotel. Back in 1960, a lot happened in the 60s. 1967, AP called me and said, Jack, because so many young men are in Southeast Asia, could you shoot us a picture that shows that there's 3 girls to every boy in the United States? So I picked these kids out of high school on a November day, and their coats were dragging the ground. And I said, you gotta drop those coats when we get ready, because we gotta shoot this picture before the goose pimples show up. So Shaw Dargan brought his surfboard. Ellen Land, Beth Mates, and Barbara Chestnut are chasing Shaw down to illustrate that there are 3 girls to one boy. That picture went around the world with the military magazine. I call it a portrait of Myrtle Beach. And yes, the golf boom came and went. And it was a wonderful time. We golfed at Pine Lakes, the Dunes Club, the Surf Club, and all of those other clubs like Robbers Roost, the Surf Club up and down the Strand. I dare say he's probably making a hole-in-one there. So back in the day, we had our 10 original golf courses. So I was lucky to tell the golf courses, if you'll give me a hat, I'll put them on the beach and take a picture. And now this is one of my classic images that a lot of people have got big prints of this in their home and in their offices. The first 10 golf courses. This is a moment that I can brag. I mentioned my brother Joe coming down and trying to get me home, but he stayed and he became manager of the Carabel Hotel, And Mr. Buster Bryan, who owned the hotel, he said, "Joe, how can we get golfers down here?" And Joe told Buster, "Well, we can offer them 2 nights and 3 days for $34.95. Buster said, "That sounds a little crazy." Joe said, "Buster, we have a membership in all the golf courses. It ain't gonna cost us to let them go play golf. All we gotta do is cook them bacon and eggs in the morning and put them up for those 2 nights." So they did, and that was the beginning of the golf boom in Myrtle Beach. Bill Davis, the president of Golf Digest in New York, came down and presented Joe with a bronze plaque, and that is the impresario golf Jimmy D'Angelo presenting that, and I take a moment of pride to mention that. And yes, one day we stumbled upon the train depot, and I said, "I believe we need to say that." Whereupon the city council, in their wisdom, decided it would be a great idea to save the train depot, and here we sit today.
Very good, Jack.
So it's there, it's a flagship destination. I did mention to council when I went before them and asked them to save it. I said it will be a flagship destination in downtown Myrtle Beach for past and future generations to enjoy. And we did, the All Aboard Committee, 14 members, we did raise the funds to restore it. And now it sits on the National Register of Historic Places. Not to mention the Walk of History out front, where we were able to sell plaques with people's name engraved, and hopefully that Walk of History will not be disturbed. Okay, the air base is closing. That was the final flyover for the Myrtle Beach Air Force Base, the A-10s. And yes, that's the opening of the boardwalk down on the waterfront. I might mention Horry County, beautiful logo. The courthouse. Tribute to the Vietnam veterans. The old schoolhouse, the borough schoolhouse, became the Horry County Museum. And I'm proud that I was on the Board of Trustees during that time that we restored the schoolhouse into a wonderful museum. Farewell. I enjoyed being down on the boardwalk with Diane, photographing the Sunfine, and Chuck. He was always walking up and down with that big camera on his shoulder. Right, Chuck? Yeah. So, thank you very much. I believe that is the end of our story.
There is no end to your story, Jack. There's some people here who want to ask some questions. Okay, right here. Yes, dear.
Whatever happened to that organ?
Whatever happened to the organ? I think I know. I bet you do too.
Yeah, the organ was transferred out to Broadway at the Beach, and it played wonderfully out there for several years, and then it became in disrepair, and I was under the impression that they had sent it off to be repaired, but then again, I also heard that it was too much upkeep, so it probably sits in a warehouse. Sadly, right, Rich?
Yeah.
Probably so, Jack. There are no stores that sell the parts for that piece of equipment. There used to be a gentleman that came down from the New England States once a year. He'd go behind it and stay there for 3 days to repair it. Would come out and tear a small sheet of paper off his pocket, write a number down and hand it to us. That's how much he wanted. That's very difficult to take your financial department and say, here, pay this. But they did.
And for those of you who don't know, that's Rich Hare, who of course ran the Myrtle Beach Pavilion for many years. He came to us from Hershey Park, so he knew what he was doing. Thank you, Rich. Another question for Jack. Chuck.
Jack, tell us the story of your eventful honeymoon.
Yes, Chuck, I'm glad, because if you didn't ask him about his honeymoon, I certainly was going to ask you about your honeymoon.
Oh,
This is a great story. Now, he told it on TV to me, so I know he can tell it here today. Keep it clean, Jack.
you know, we all have had summer loves. I imagine. And yes, I was a weightlifter and loved to walk on the beach, and the girls, you could walk girls on the beach at night, and I was a singer and I would sing to the girls at night. And I ran into another beautiful girl who had big blue eyes I could not get away from, and she wanted me to go shagging with her. So we went down to the little Spivey Beach, and we shagged all night. And the next day we laid out on the beach, and we became very good friends. And would you hold that?
Certainly.
We became very good friends, and that became a summer love. Back then, she was 15 and I was 17. She told me her daddy was coming to take her home and not let her come back to be with this beach bum. So we had to have some way to figure out how to keep her in Myrtle Beach. And she said, since we're all adults in here, she said, I'm afraid for my dad to come because I miss my period.
He didn't say that on television. So you're getting the full story.
I said, yeah, I missed a few of those in high school. So I said, well, we have to do something. So we tried to scheme up something to keep her dad from coming and taking her home. So I had her write a letter, and it said, Your Honor, I'm sorry I cannot be there for my daughter's wedding because I am handicapped. But I do give my permission for her to get married to Jackie Thompson. So I got on a bus, Trailway bus, and I rode all the way to Winston-Salem, and I mailed that letter. There was another bus leaving from Myrtle Beach. It only took 12 hours. So I got on the other bus and I came back. And the next day we took that letter over to the judge. The judge, first thing he did was look at the postmark. And he opened the letter and he said, well, I guess that's okay. Be at my house tonight about 6 o'clock and I'll marry you. Well, the weather was terrible. But we hitched a ride to Conway to the judge's house, little frame house. We got up on the porch and he opened the door and said, well, I guess you can come in, get out of that weather. His wife and her sister were over in the corner watching watching Amos and Andy on a 19-inch television with a clothes hanger, antenna, and he married us to the tune of Amos and Andy. So yes, we did get married, and when we went on our way back, the wind and the rain was about to blow the car off old 501, but we were protected with the tall trees that lined 501 at that time. So we got back to the beach, and Rachel, my beautiful wife, sold tickets at the Broadway the Broadway theater. So they gave us a free movie and free popcorn as a wedding present. So about 11 o'clock, the police came in and closed down the theater, said that there was a storm coming. So we ran around the corner. I was in the big Welcome Inn frame-built house by Sloppy Joe's because I painted all the rooms for my rent, and I had the room up on the top floor, room 28. So we go upstairs for our honeymoon. 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody's banging on the door. And Rachel said, "I believe that's my daddy." I said, "Oh Lord, what'll I do?" She said, "You're gonna have to answer the door." So I got up and I opened the door, and here's a guy in a military poncho, soaking wet. He even had a helmet on. And I turned to Rachel and I said, "Oh my God, he sent the National Guard." He said, you folks have to come with me. We're evacuating this whole welcome in. So we go down the stairs and put us in a convoy truck. Rachel said, "Well, where are we going?" And I said, "I don't know, probably a concentration camp." So we went on to the Myrtle Beach School, which was down where the post office is today. And I got Rachel settled. And then, of course, I took off back to Skip's to get the camera so I could get out and photograph. Then I realized that that camera had a cloth bellows on it, and I couldn't get the camera out in the weather. So I got involved with the rescue, and up and down the boulevard, the police and the military were trying to get people off the ocean front. And I wound up down at Miss Bird's cottages on the ocean front by the 2nd Avenue Pier. You remember Miss Bird? Miss Bird was a biology teacher. They were bringing her out, and she said, "Jackie, would you get my car?" And she had a beautiful little Studebaker, 49 Studebaker. She said, "Get my car. Here are the keys." And I got the keys, and I had just got my driver's license. So I jumped in her car, and the waves are breaking on the back of the car. Instead of putting it in drive, I put it in reverse. And I backed that beautiful little Studebaker into the ocean. Never told her about that, but a couple months later, her insurance company gave her a big, beautiful Mercury stationery. So I think that is the end of my story.
I think it's the wildest honeymoon in the history of America. What do you all think? We have time for a few more questions.
Might want to point out that was the evening of the Hurricane Hazel.
Hurricane Hazel, 1954? October 1954, or was it a different hurricane?
Hurricane Hazel, October the 14th and 15th, 1954.
Right. And by the way, there's a documentary on Hurricane Hazel back there if you're interested. Some more questions? Yes?
Charlie's Place. Tell us anything.
What can you tell us about Charlie's Place?
Charlie's Place, yes. back in the early 50s, I was working at Skip's studio, and Charlie Fitzgerald was a black operator of a wonderful night spot over on what we called over on the hill. And it was very successful, and they had the big bands that came through the Myrtle Beach area. And of course, during the segregation, the big bands couldn't find a place to stay on Myrtle Beach, but there were places to stay out on the hill, we called it. Or else there was a hotel up in Windy Hill by Atlantic Beach called the Colonial, where a lot of the bands went up there. But what a wonderful musical tribute. They had Eartha Kitt and Sammy Davis and a lot of the big names to come through and play at Charlie's place. Now there was a time when dancing at the pavilion kind of grew a little stale after midnight. So some of the characters, in fact Dino Thompson was one of them, that would take a group over to Charlie's place where they danced all night, which was supposed to be the beginning of the Lindy. The Lindy became the jitterbug, and the jitterbug became the shag. And my description of the shag was when the guys danced with the girls, and the guys did the half step as if they weren't paying attention, and the girls were dancing as fast as they could, and the guys were just kind of ignoring what the girls were doing, because the guys wanted to be sophisticated. So that was pretty much the beginning of the shag at the pavilion. It originated at Charlie's place, and then it became too righteous, too rowdy for the pavilion crowd, so the pavilion encouraged everybody to move on up to Ocean Drive. So the shag was reborn in Ocean Drive, which is today SOS, Society of Shaggers.
And now, amazingly so, the guys are dancing faster than the girls, so the times have changed. Jen, are we okay with a couple more questions? Okay, yes, dear.
Can you tell us anything about Fred Nash and his wife Agnes?
Do you want to say anything about Fred Nash?
Fred Nash. Back in the day, I think 53, a jet plane, I'm trying to think of the name of that plane, supersonic planes actually came into the new air base, were flying in and out and taking advantage of that big new runway. And on one occasion, a plane was flying in for a landing and crashed into the end of the Spring-Made Pier and caught on fire. And Mr. Fred Nash had a little night spot down by Spring-Made Pier. Mr. Fred Nash saw that plane hit the end of the pier, and without thinking, he ran out and ran down that pier and pulled that pilot out of that burning airplane. And that was Fred Nash, father of Charlie and Wendell and all the Nash boys. And now they have named a street after Fred Nash coming out of Market Common, the Fred Nash Boulevard. So, thank you, Fred.
All right, one or two more, yes.
I bet you have pictures of Joe White, Mr. Joe White, since he was right there next to you.
My dad would take me to the barber shop.
Mr. Joe White, tell us something about Mr. Joe White, the shoe shine man, or as he used to say,
Yes, Joe White.
he called himself the shoe stylist.
Yes, shoe stylist. Well, thank you for that, and yes, I'd like to mention Joe White. When I started in Myrtle Beach at the pavilion in that winter, Mr. Lamb brought me up to Skip's studio that I showed you there. And Joe White was a shoe stylist down on the corner at the Arcade building. And Joe White would come in every afternoon like clockwork, 5 o'clock, and sweep the floor and wash the windows. And then he'd come back and I'm cleaning up the dark room and I'm doing the same thing. Well, the rest of that story is my brother Joe and I worked together, and when it come time for Joe to go meet Doris across the street at Brian Gandy, he would say, Jack, you clean up. I'm going over and sit with Doris. So, you know, I learned from the ground up how to mop floors and do that sort of thing. But Joe White would come in every afternoon and come back there where I'm cleaning up. And he said, Jackie, you're doing a good job, but I want to suggest you do one thing. When Mr. Lamb gives you that pay envelope, I want you to take $2 and go down to the postal savings at the post office and put $2 of your paycheck in that savings account. And I took him serious. So the next day I got my little paycheck and I went down and put $2 in that. At the end of the summer, I had $600 in there to go to Chapin and buy my school clothes and her school clothes. So Joe White did me a great service by teaching me how important it was to save money. It's just terrible that we don't have postal savings today. Joe White, a great guy.
Absolutely, and Joe, of course, even started one of the churches in the black community off of 10th Avenue. He was a wonderful guy, and as I said, one day on TV, he corrected me and he said, I was not a shoe shiner, I was a shoe stylist, he said with pride. So we're gonna let Jack hang out and answer questions personally, but we want to thank all of you for being here, and please know that really the Chapin Library has done an incredible job of putting together a great series of people, maybe not quite as learned as Jack, but they've certainly all been around a really long time, and you can get the list and the dates, and we hope that you will all meet us. All the other series will be taking place at the Chapin Library. We did this one here so Jack could do his presentation. But ladies and gentlemen, I know you want to join me in sending love to Jack Thompson. You should also know that right now Jack has all of his photographs in the old Army-Navy store down off of Broadway, on Broadway. And
From the laundry.
across from the laundry. And also there's a Facebook page that's set up to try to help Jack raise some money for a building of his own so that he won't have to keep paying rent as he's had to do most of his career. Jack Thompson, ladies and gentlemen.